This week on the Book Drop, you'll meet the podcast team as we discuss how COVID-19, working from home, and social distancing are affecting our reading habits, or in some cases how it's just totally killed our will to read. We'll also answer our first query of the week, and you'll get to bear witness as we make it through our very first episode. So get ready, here comes the Book Drop. Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Book Drop. My name is Erin, and I'm the Readers and Writers Librarian at Omaha Public Library. I want to thank you for clicking on our little podcast. This podcast, like many I'm sure we'll find out, was born during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. With our libraries closed, library staff have been working to find ways that we can still connect with our community while we're all practicing social distancing. Our children's staff have been creating online story times and videos on early literacy tips for parents. We're working to boost our digital materials purchasing and finding ways to ensure our community knows about all the great online resources that are available while our doors are closed. We also miss talking to you and miss hearing from you and hope that this podcast is another way we'll all be able to connect. Our hosts will slightly rotate in and out each week, but our hope is that you'll get to know us and you'll get a chance to hear from some of your favorite library staff from your neighborhood branches. Not in Omaha? No worries, there will be plenty of things for you to enjoy as well. This is essentially a podcast about books hosted by a bunch of cool nerds. Each week, the Book Drop will explore topics related to our community, libraries, and the joy of reading. Our show will break down into 3 segments. To open, we'll talk about things in the news, chat with a special guest, or check in with Omaha Public Library staff to see what they're working on. The bulk of each episode will be a group discussion. This might be a hot issue in libraries, a deeper dive into genre reading, or really anything we think you might want to hear about right now. We'll close each episode with a query of the week, a question posed to the group and invite listeners to chime in with their own answers. You'll get to hear from special guests, including authors, community organizations, and other library staff about the work they're doing. Our goal is to give you a little insight into what's happening at your local library and to dive into our favorite topic, all things book-related. So thank you again for checking out our podcast. We hope you like it, and we hope we get to hear from you. This is the Book Drop, and our first group discussion starts now. So since this is our first episode, let's all introduce ourselves. We're going to say who we are, what we do for the library, and where you can usually find us.
I'm Michelle Carlson, the book club librarian based at the Wilcoxon branch.
I'm David Dick. I am a specialist, and you can usually find me at the Abrahams branch.
My name's Elly Roberts. I'm also a specialist. I work with kids, and you can find me at the Abrahams branch, although I recently transferred there from our A.V. Sorensen branch in Dundee.
My name's Anna Wilcoxon. I am the Diversity and Inclusion Librarian for OPL, and I usually work out of the South Omaha branch.
And my name is Erin Duerr. I'm the Readers and Writers Librarian, and you usually find me at Main Library downtown. So our first conversation, our discussion this week is about reading in the time of COVID. So to set the stage a little bit, we are in our 4th week of our libraries being closed. Most of us are working from home or working inside the libraries in a limited capacity. And I think we're all social distancing as best we can. So that's kind of where we're at. So my first question for everybody is, what are your physical limitations of our situations? And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that is that it was announced that we were closing on a Sunday night, and I was at work kind of luckily. So we had like a very small window to be like, oh, I better check out all my holds and take them home. But I know we had patrons who were calling the library and being like, what do I do with my books? How do I get books? Which are really like important questions for them, which we didn't have answers for at the time. But I also hoard library books. So there's always like 25 to 40 items in my house from the library. And I'm also a very aspirational reader, so I have no limit to things I could read if I was wanting to read, is where I'm at. David, where are you at?
I'm almost out of library books. I also was working that Sunday and had picked up my holds, but I tend to buy a lot of books when I travel, and so I still have books that I bought 2 years ago and then just keep putting off because library books have due dates.
Right. Elly?
Yeah, so this may be the first time that my habit of checking out like way more than I can possibly read in 3 weeks has paid off. So that's kind of nice for me. I also love to read in my backyard, so this nice weather has been like a really great miracle right now for me. I usually do a lot of downloadable audiobooks through Libby. I love that service, but because I want our patrons to have as many as available as possible, I'm kind of skipping that part of my routine right now.
That's really nice.
Thanks.
Anna, how about you?
Yeah, I only had a couple library books at home when this started, so I felt kind of panicky at first. Like, what am I going to read? But I have a lot of books at home in my home library that I haven't read or haven't read for a very long time, so I can always revisit those. And I'm a person that typically really likes a print book. I like the physical act of holding it, turning the pages. So ebooks have not been something I read before, but I did check out my first ebook when this started. Unlike Elly, I was not as kind to think about our patrons. And that helped me get back into reading. So I've slowed down, but still finding things to read.
Anna, what ebook did you check out?
I checked out Black Leopard, Red Wolf.
Oh,
Super good.
Had you really never checked out an ebook before?
Not a fiction one.
Okay,
I
yeah.
read one really brief nonfiction personal finance book, but that was
that's right.
Yeah, my first ebook. So
That's
new
really
world is opened to me. Yeah.
Michelle, where are you at?
So I have been leaving all my books when I check them out at the library because of overdue fines when I take them home, and then I forget to bring them back when they are due. So I decided just to be leaving everything at my desk until I'm ready for that specific item to take home with me. So at the time I had 4 books maybe here, which I was like, oh, that should be fine. But then I was like, no, what if I need all of them? However, I still haven't actually read any of them, which is kind of a bummer. Yeah. So I'm hoping that either an energy spurt or something will come along the way so that I can, get into that reading habit again.
Yeah. So that's a good segue. So for everybody, how have your reading habits changed or maybe stay the same in the last, I guess now it's a month. So Michelle, let's start with you since you mentioned it.
So I feel like my habits haven't changed, which I wish they did. Maybe it's because, I don't know, I'm still telecommuting, so working. So at the end of the day, I still don't want to do just sit down with a book sometimes. I just want to zone out and watch TV or, after dinner, and it's just other things are having priorities, doing some social Zoom calls with friends and stuff like that. But weekends, I am realizing that's when you used to go out and do other things. And so now you don't. So I'm going to try to make a real solid effort this weekend to block off some time and say, you're going to read for an hour.
Yeah. That's hard though. You have to make yourself do it. That's difficult.
Well, yeah. And I shouldn't say it I'm going to force myself to read because that's definitely not my intention. It's just to be realizing oh, you've watched 2 hours, 3.5 hours of television already this morning. Why not go outside, read? Hopefully it'll be nice enough to read outside, like Elly had said. Yeah.
David, how about you?
Really varies depending on the day and how I'm mentally dealing with the constant bad news going on in the background. The days when I don't really pay attention to the news at all, it goes pretty well and I'm tearing through books. But if I check Twitter, if I look at the news at all, then it just becomes, okay, I'm going to play video games instead of read because that takes 4 out of 5 senses and I can distract myself.
Yeah. Elly, where are you at?
Yeah, I was already in a little bit of a rut. I was focusing on kids and teens graphic novels because those can kind of motivate me to kind of churn through them a little bit more. And this has definitely made it worse. I don't really have any of those checked out right now. So I'm just having a really hard time motivating myself to just pick up a book. Once I start reading, I read about what I would before. But I think that part of it is kind of the flow of the workday. I'm already at home, I'm on my computer. After I'm done working on my computer, I just open up Netflix and watch, something I've already seen 4 times.
Right. Anna, how about you?
Yeah, I had a really hard time reading during the first couple of weeks of this, which is definitely unusual for me. It was hard to get my brain to focus, I think, on the page and just not have all of the other kind of mental noise happening. So I spent the first couple of weeks mostly like on Netflix and HBO and knitting again, which I hadn't done for a really long time. That was really like meditative. But I think what I've realized is like typically I like to read books that are fairly like they have a social justice bent. I'll be like typically it'll be about either fiction or nonfiction, where they'll kind of delve into like a very real situation that could be happening right now, and I can't deal with those kinds of books at the moment. It's just too much. So I think if I can find other books that are a little more escapist, that might be something that helps keep me reading. But the kind of stuff I want to read is definitely different right now.
So for me, I would say there was definitely like an initial lull where I think I read right before bed, and then I'll read other times like during the weekend or something. But I'm also a person who comes home from work and has to watch TV a lot just to decompress. So I know that like I initially just first started reading like kind of a fluffy romance, and it took me like a lot longer than it should have taken. And I was just at the same time seeing a bunch of people being like, I can't read right now. I can't read right now. And I was kind of at the same place. And just now, like 4 weeks in, finally like have a book that I feel like I want to sit down and read it, which is a feeling I haven't had in a few weeks. So that's really nice. To follow up all on that, have any of you tried to like really pinpoint where this is coming from? I mean, we know this is where it's coming from. It's coming from the fact that like we're in a global pandemic, but kind of we're collective, like grieving. I know like initially the first week I was like very focused on certain things. I felt like I had a mission about like, we need to social distance. And I was really like excited about this, like talking about this like thing. And so everything else kind of fell away. And then now I don't really have that. But has anybody else kind of thought about like, what's the real source of their like blocking, I guess?
Definitely grief for me. There just seems to be so much bad news coming out of everywhere. And, I miss sitting and reading in a coffee shop. I miss going to the bar after work. I miss being able to see friends and, like be within 6 feet of friends and, kind of grieving what is lost.
Right. Like your normal life. Yeah. Everybody's lives just changed dramatically.
I think that something that I'm realizing is that interacting with patrons every day and being kind of that resource for reading and being excited about reading and having like new books to talk to patrons about has been a really big motivator for me since I've been working at the library for like 3 years now. And just the fact that I don't have that right now, I don't have patrons that I am really enthusiastic about providing kind of the resource of being an enthusiastic, like up-to-date reader. That's been really hard losing that motivation. So I think that's close to what it's about for me. I finished my first book in 3 weeks the other day, which was very exciting. Usually I'm at about a book a week, so that was a big lag for me. And it was a essay collection, Make It Scream, Make It Burn by Leslie Jameson. And I noticed that having like smaller narratives was a little bit easier. I've also been reading a novel that's like really engaging and really dynamic, but for some reason, once I get like maybe 25 minutes into it, just like kind of my emotional commitment to it falls flat. So I think that kind of short stories and essays are going to be the way to go for me for a little while.
I would also echo the missing that patron interaction and that being such an energy drain that I know I'm an extrovert, at least 90% of me is. And so the workday is like, I didn't get into this business because I wanted to be on a computer all day. I wanted to talk to people and help people. And so like Elly had said about that, a little bit of the loss of enthusiasm when it comes to reading, or it's more for just like intrinsic motivation instead of, using it as that tool that I usually use it in my work life. I think that's definitely part of it. And I think just routine in general is out of whack. And so at the end of the workday, it's like, I don't know, turning to other things for the zoning out comfort. So a lot of that happens to be TV, unfortunately. Not that there's bad TV. I mean, there is a lot of bad TV, but there's also just that overwhelming pressure right now about like, what are you consuming? What are you doing? How are you staying productive? And so I don't know, I get overwhelmed with that. And then it's like, nope, I'm just going to shut down instead. Not a healthy habit.
I think there's some comfort in giving yourself that mental space to turn your brain off. Like I think that's self-care in a way.
Right.
like some element of that.
There is this huge message right now to like be productive, or this is the time to be productive. But like, I don't think that's true. Like we're still like at the kind of beginning of this thing. And I think everybody should be gentle with themselves. Like, if you want to come home, or if you're already home, if you want to be home and after work, like watch bad TV, like that's totally okay. I mean, I feel this way in general about reading, like, you shouldn't do it because you think you need to do it, right? You should only be doing it because you want to be doing it. But I feel like that's not where a lot of readers come from. They think it's a thing they need to do. Oh, I did also hear you basically all say that you miss your patrons, which I think is a really nice message. So
really just missing that like reading community is something I couldn't have predicted, but has definitely hit me pretty hard.
Right. So for those of you who are reading right now, what are you leaning towards, if it's anything specific?
For me, it's my comfort zone, which is memoirs. I just really find it soothing to learn about other people's stories, how they are coping with their different life experiences, from really tough times to how they experience joy. And so I'm currently trying to read Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb, one of our Omaha Reads nominations. And it is the perfect book for me right now. So I do find so much joy when I do sit down to read it. I just need to make sure I'm being more intentional when it comes to, making that time.
David, how about you?
I'm mostly reading what I would be reading anyway, but I do read a lot of horror and science fiction that involves diseases and plagues and the like, and I'm leaning away from that right now just because it's hard. One of my favorite books my all-time favorite book of 2019 was kind of about what's happening now to a small degree, where the premise of the book was, after a series of events which include plagues, all large gatherings have been banned indefinitely. And it's, like a dystopian science fiction novel about rock music. It's Song for a New Day by Sarah Pinksker. And I loved it, but this definitely wouldn't be a time when I would reread it.
Nice. Anna, you talked about your ebook that you checked out, but so what are you kind of leaning towards then?
Yeah, so I think after having the experience with that book that book, it was Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James. It's available on an ebook format and also a downloadable audiobook from OPL. It's a really brutal and violent story, but it's set in a world that's so different from our reality that I guess it didn't heighten my anxiety somehow. So I think I'll be looking for more books that are maybe set in a totally different type of world. And I don't know if that will be something that will help me continue to be able to read. At Elly, I liked your suggestion of reading like short stories or like essays. That's a great idea. Something that doesn't maybe demand quite so much from you in one sitting. Be good.
Anna, what do you think about the comparison of that book to like being an African Game of Thrones? What's your take on that?
I didn't read any of the Game of Thrones books, but I watched this series and got obsessed with it like so many others. I can see like elements of it in the kind of like the dialogue. Sometimes they have like clever cutting comments with each other. There weren't as many like political kind of negotiations that happened. I could see it unfolding like visually in a very cinematic, strong way, like Game of Thrones. But I feel like people that liked Game of Thrones might also like this book. That it doesn't have. There's some element of like magic. There's like witchcraft and monsters in it. A lot of murder and violence, but I mean, that made me a little bit more, like, as someone that doesn't read fantasy, typically having that to kind of latch onto made me more likely, I think, to pick up this book. But yeah, I'd be curious to talk to somebody. Have you read both Game of Thrones and
No, I haven't. We'll talk about this later, but high fantasy does not do it for me. So
yeah, this one felt like approachable to me. There weren't like, I mean, I guess maybe there weren't dragons, but there were other flying monsters. So it still may not be a book for you.
One thing that really would have made it like Game of Thrones, though, are there a lot of descriptions of food?
No. Food?
I didn't know that was a trope.
That's not a thing that people know unless they've read the books, that like
I had no
there's
idea.
just these like gratuitous like descriptions of, I haven't read the book either, except I read one of these things. It's like gratuitous descriptions of like food and feasts and stuff, which I think the show like changed out with like, here's some gratuitousness, but in a different form.
Yeah.
I don't think I can read about feasts right now. I'm really hurting on the like having to cook all my own food front. So
Feasting on mac and cheese most days.
So I want to talk about reading goals a little bit. I think most of us, if we aren't currently, in the past, we've like either set a goal or we take part in like a reading challenge. So I want to know that if like either because maybe you have more time or you're at home, or just that our lives have dramatically changed recently, if that's kind of affecting any reading goals that you had for yourself.
I think I just really want to finish a book right now.
That's your goal.
My biggest goal. Yes, absolutely. Other reading goals that I had for the year really were about, I didn't finish our OPL challenge last year. I was short by 2 books. And so I really just want to try to finish that. But sometimes that means you have to be more selective in what you choose to read. And so right now I'm going to let that go and just read what I want, what's appealing to me in the moment. Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
I would like to listen to more audiobooks. And I don't usually listen to a lot of audiobooks. I tend to be a bit of a solitary reader. But, you know, both my spouse and I are home all the time. And why not have reading be something we do together rather than just waste time on YouTube or make mac and cheese again?
Nice.
I love that idea.
Yeah. Elly?
Yeah, I was on track for my goals like pretty well. I was finishing about a book a week for part of 2020, but I just have to reset my expectations. So for right now, I'm trying to focus on just doing any amount of reading a physical book once a day, because I just want to get back into the habit of sitting down with a book and taking that time. That is my new temporary goal.
That's nice. Anna, how about you?
So the past 2 years, I've had the same 2 reading goals. And one was to not read any books written by white men, just because I've read a million of those throughout my life. And my other goal is to read 50 books a year. And I'd been ahead of schedule for this year. So I think I can still make that happen, but we'll see. But yeah, kind of like Michelle mentioned too, just to find books that I want to read and be able to get through them, and low pressure on myself to achieve the goals, but they're still there.
That's good. This is the first year in a long time that I finally decided I wasn't going to set a number goal, because over the last like 5 years or so, every year that number would like creep up. And I was like, this is just reading for the sake of reading. And it wasn't like actually getting to like good reading, I think, or I would just like read stuff to get to that number, which I think is kind of terrible and against a lot of like my reading soul. So I was already like at a point, like I still track in Goodreads, but I'm not counting, and but I will count at the end of the year because I'm going to need to know like how many books I read. But so I'd already been like, no pressure, just read what you want to read and read at the pace you want to read. And that was already really freeing. So I think it gave me like the opportunity to just be like very gentle with myself right now, to be like, whatever pace you're reading is totally fine, and that's okay. And to know that a bunch of people are already in that same situation where you're like, just not reading right now, and that's okay. That is kind of the end of our discussion, but do you guys have any final thoughts about reading in the time of COVID?
I think I just want to remind everybody about good old Nancy Pearl, our, patron saint
Patron
of
saint.
libraries. And her rule about the 50-page rule, where like if you read the first 50 pages and you're still not hooked or you're not really feeling it, and honestly, give yourself some grace, and that could even just be the 10 or 15 pages. And if you're not feeling it, it's okay to quit a book. Like, just put it down, find something that you are going to be interested in. Nobody should force themselves to finish a book unless they like really love it.
That was so hard for me to do for such a long time. I used
Mm-hmm.
to, like, for years, I felt that if I started a book, I was like committed. I had to like see it through to the end. And it was only until like these past few years that I was like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. Time is too precious, and there are too many other things I want to read. Great advice.
I tell patrons to do it all the time, but I can't practice what I preach in that regard. I force myself to finish things all the time.
I think what I would encourage patrons to keep in mind is something that I try to keep in mind myself, which is any reading is good reading. If you're rereading something, that's great. If you're listening to audiobooks, that's wonderful. If you're listening to like one of those super long form podcasts that has like multiple episodes all about the same subject, you are still exercising the parts of your brain that you get benefits from because of reading. So ebooks, whatever you've got, any reading is good reading.
Right. Michelle is the one, you're the person who, someone had the quote about like, you don't read right with your eyes, ears.
Yeah.
You
fingers.
read with your, fingers, you read with your mind, right? Like, so all of that counts. It's all mental energy. You're all exploring new ideas. All of it is totally valid. And I feel like if there's one goal I'd have as like a library person in the world is like to make people, or to get people to like accept the reading they do as good reading, and to not like try to live up to other people's standards, and also to get those other people to like chill out and let other people read what they want to read, right?
Exactly.
So
yeah, if you're reading fanfic right now, like congratulations.
Awesome.
Great. Keep doing
Yeah.
it.
It's like
all of
a way
the
to
stuff.
support local too.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, so every week we're going to close our show with something called Query of the Week, which is just a question that we're going to pose to the group, and you have about, we say like 15 seconds or like a tweet length response to give us your answer, and we will also invite listeners in the future to give us their responses. So the query of the week this week is, what are you reading, watching, or listening to right now? Which I feel like is a question, it's an evergreen question that we'll probably use multiple times. And I will go first and go very quickly. So I'm on a month-long binge of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, and it's bringing me like a whole lot of joy right now and comfort. So Anna, how about you?
I've been watching the most recent season of The Walking Dead. And also, there's Conan O'Brien has a podcast that's pretty great called Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. And I've been listening to that, like re-listen. My favorite episode is the one with Jeff Goldblum. So if you want to start somewhere, that's a really great place to start with that podcast.
I love Jeff Goldblum.
And I totally ditto that podcast. It brings me so much joy.
Awesome. Michelle, how about you?
So I currently live with my parents, and so in trying to find TV shows and stuff that we all can agree on, so I introduced them to Kim's Convenience, which is a Canadian comedy, and it's about this Korean family that owns a convenience store, and it's just so funny, and we are all laughing out loud together, which brings me a lot of joy also.
That's awesome. David?
One of my rituals that I've been using to make the week seem normal is I listen to music for 15 to 30 minutes both before and after work. So I have been listening to the Black Album by The Damned. It's the album where they went from a punk band to a goth band. So there's still a lot of fast songs, but then there's slow songs with droning over.
Nice. Elly, how about you?
I am reading Deathless Divide right now by Justina Ireland. It is the sequel to a book called Dread Nation, and the premise of the story is that during the Civil War, during the Battle of Gettysburg, the dead came back to life. So the Civil War has just kind of been put on pause, and it is about kind of how younger Black women are adapting to this world. It's a YA book. It's very adventure-y. It's got some like almost steampunk elements, and it's obviously an alternative history. So I absolutely love it. Justina Ireland is a wild, like exciting, entertaining writer. So I am really enjoying that, and I'm watching the new season of Westworld.
Awesome.
this is our first show, so I don't know how we're normally going to end our show, but we could all just say like, good job, great job.
Bye.
Keep reading.
Yeah.
Keep reading. That's like, what's our tagline, I guess, is I don't know.
Don't return your books right now.
I
Your
love that
books.
one.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, that's our first episode, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to hear your answer for our next query of the week, which is, who is your favorite fictional pair? That pair could be best friends, a romantic couple, partners in crime, or any duo from any form of fiction. Send your responses in a 15-second audio clip or tweet length response to me, Erin, at ERDUERR@omahalibrary.org. The Book Drop is produced by Omaha Public Library. Our theme music is Trapped in Amber, courtesy of the band Lucid Fugue. Don't forget to follow The Book Drop on your favorite podcast app and like and follow Omaha Public Library on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll talk to you next time on The Book Drop.